Let's call this meeting to order, if you don't mind, of the June 2023 Finance Committee meeting. July, thank you very much. Well, that's the first thing I need to change in this sheet here. It's July. There you go. It's July. I didn't remember it. Thank you very much. Hank, you're always paying attention. Thank God. All right. David, any public speakers, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have 4 speakers today, but as a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I also would like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware there'll be a warning beep to remind you when you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Our first speaker today is Christopher Greif, who will be followed by Jason Anthony. I believe Mr. Greif has left, so the next speaker is Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Jack Nierenberg.
Hey, Neil. Let's talk about the fare and toll increases that I believe that you guys are going to discuss it. I believe that hear this. I rather take a 4% fare and toll increase than a 8% fare and toll increase that the Port Authority considered. But listen to this. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey did it with no to little public input. But listen to this, Kevin Willens. They do their fare and toll increase automatic due to inflation. I hope that you guys don't consider doing an annual fare and toll increase due to inflation, because that will be a chaos due to, let's say, that will affect the economy of New York City. So I'd rather take that 4% fare and toll increase, but keep in mind, I pay my fare when I go to work in Amazon in Staten Island, but I see people that work in Amazon like I do, but they don't pay their fair share. So let's deploy the Eagle Team full force in Staten Island to see if they paid their fair share. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday from Amazon.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Nierenberg, who will be followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack Nierenberg, Vice President of Passengers United. And by a show of hands, how many of you take the subway every day? Think about how this fare increase will affect your life, because it's definitely affecting my life, everyone in here, I'm assuming. It's going to make it much harder for everyone financially. And that's just one of many concerns. The express buses are going up to $7. Many of these communities who are really going to be hit the hardest are disadvantaged communities that rely on the express buses, that rely on the subways and the local buses, and especially rely on the railroads. And one thing about the railroads, we've been discussing the issue of the Atlantic ticket. They want to merge that, create a new city ticket with a higher peak fare. Now, think about how that's going to affect everyone. These people rely on this. This is the Atlantic ticket, by the way. This is a weekly Atlantic ticket. For $60, you can travel the railroad from Southeast Queens to Brooklyn and get a 7-day unlimited Metro card, which satisfies your commuting needs. And these are people who don't have the same privilege that I'm assuming many of you have. So in our view, if you really want to get people on public transportation, do you think a fare increase is actually going to do the job? If anything, the fare should be decreased, especially with the weekly Atlantic ticket. First of all, $2.75 is good for the subways and the buses, but the Atlantic ticket should be $40 for the week. This will really help people get onto public transportation. It's going to be an incentive, and it's going to help you all, because more people, more fare revenue. So I strongly oppose these fare increases for all the reasons I've stated. So I really hope that you really have the empathy necessary to really satisfy that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Charlton D'Souza.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is D-Day, the fare increase day. And this is the Atlantic ticket. I remember I was the first person who bought it at the Queens Village station. This $60 weekly pass changed my life. It changed the lives of people in Southeast Queens. I beg this board, and I know we've had disagreements. Please, please, guys, don't do this to Southeast Queens. Please have the city ticket turn this weekly pass into a city ticket weekly pass for either $40 or $60 so we can ride the subway system with equity. Please, because you guys want to implement congestion pricing. You guys are, the subways are so bad. People are getting killed on the subway. It takes me 2 hours and 30 minutes overnight to get home because technically I can't even afford $60. Okay, I'm one of those people. And just to have this program opens up the doors. Imagine how the time savings. 40 minutes, 35 minutes from Grand Central to Queens Village. That is true equity. So please, guys, the chairman, all of you, I beg you, please keep the $60 weekly pass. The base fare should remain at $275. But if y'all want to raise the unlimited 7-day to $1, that's understandable. Same thing with the 30-day, really make it up $1. But what happens to the $1 fee that we pay? Because you guys keep that $1 fee when you buy the Metro card. But there has to be equity for the city, for the Bronx, for Brooklyn, for Queens. And, we need the $60 pass. As far as the express bus, I think it should be kept at the same fare. And the weekly Express Bus Plus Pass should be kept at the same fare, only because you guys keep canceling Express Bus trips, But $275, it beats the cost of a Uber any day, which is like $40 to $60. So help us out, guys, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have one other speaker on Zoom. I was just told about Andy Pollock.
Okay.
Okay, David, finally I got acknowledged. Hi, Neil. Hi, everyone. So, 2 things I want to discuss before the end of the summer. So, number one, my colleagues have been discussing the Atlantic ticket, as you just heard Jack and Charlton from Passengers United. And we cannot have this ticket program eliminated because it's been around now for 5 years, and a lot of people in Southeast Queens rely on this program. And I know this morning there was a lot of talk about, we're going to be adding more peak service from Queens Village and Howard. But if you eliminate this program, how are people supposed to have direct service to Atlantic Terminal? So again, please do not eliminate the Atlantic ticket. We need this program. So hopefully we can keep that when the board votes fully on this on Wednesday. And also, before I wrap up my remarks, I am now opposing the congestion pricing plan. There have been scientists that have been working with the state of New Jersey. Yes, I'm not going to say where I got my information from. They have done their own research, and they have determined that if congestion pricing goes through, we will see more congestion on the roadways in the Bronx. So I'm just going to disclose that for the record. So with that, Neil, enjoy the rest of your summer, and I will speak to you all again in the fall.
Thank you very much, Chair. That concludes the public comments.
All right, David, thank you very much. We do listen to the public speakers. Just to be clear, this committee is not voting on the fare increase today. I believe that's being done at the board meeting on Wednesday. So just not to disappoint folks, but that will be held there. Thank you. Minutes for the June 26th meeting, please, page 5. Have a motion to approve. Thank you, Blanca. Second. Thank you for the joint committee on seconding over there. Any edits, corrections, deletions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention. Motion passes. 2023 work plan is on page 10. No changes to be had. The piece de resistance of today is the July financial plan, which I think has been somewhat previewed in some settings. But Kevin Kevin, you have the floor to
Okay.
share with us the very good news of our July plan.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. As you may recall, when the budget was proposed last November, we were facing these large deficits brought on by the lost revenue from COVID. Now, I'm pleased to report that today's financial plan will show 5 years of projected balanced budgets. This is a huge success story. Today's plan shows MTA's transition from an uncertain financial future to a balanced plan for many years to come. Today's forecast of financial stability is made possible by bold leadership by the governor and a balanced plan adopted by the legislature, supported by the city in this year's state budget. The MTA board, who both embraced the plan and sent the signal to address our financial needs decisively. The delivery of outstanding service by our operating agencies and their employees, who gave confidence to our stakeholders to invest more in the MTA. Collaborative work across the MTA to develop actionable solutions and communicate them to political leaders and advocates. Combined financial support from the state, city, taxpayers, and riders. But our work is not done. Part of balancing the plan is MTA delivering on the $400 million of operating efficiencies while continuing to deliver great service. We've already booked $200 million and will be locking down the remaining $200 million in November. But no rest for the weary. We're going a step further. In this plan, we're targeting another $100 million of recurring efficiencies to be put in place in 2025, bringing the annual total to $500 million. Rich and Kathy, who are carrying the burden of this great plan, will present to the committee shortly on their efforts. The July plan, which is available on our website, is a mid-year update and an early look at the 2024 preliminary budget. Importantly, no action is being asked for today by either the committee or the board on Wednesday with respect to the July plan. We'll be coming back in November with the proposed 2024 budget. So let's go through some highlights, unless you want to just keep looking at this beautiful page of zeros. All right, the forecast period extends 1 year, giving a preliminary look at 2027. We continue to forecast ridership along the McKinsey midpoint. State dedicated revenues reflect the state budget agreement and some revised receipt estimates. The re-estimated agency expense budgets and debt service projection incorporating the expected TWE agreement and that pattern applying MTA-wide. A 4% fare increase and a 5.5% toll increase by the end of this August that the board will be voting on Wednesday. And we're still assuming 4% fare and toll increases in 2025 and 2027, that periodic modest increases. Ridership, we're tracking the midpoint. As you see, we're just coming up to around 70%. As we talked about, revenues are tracking a little bit higher, but you'll see there we need to continue to move up and hit 80. The plan is based on hitting 80% of pre-pandemic ridership in 2027. And that's paid ridership that we need to hit. So what's changed in this July plan since the December budget? So these are 5-year aggregate numbers. So as we talked about earlier in the in a previous committee meeting, the state budget agreement provides roughly $6.5 billion to eliminate those previously projected deficits. But then there's other things that change. As I mentioned, labor expenses, we're going to be assuming an extra $1.15 billion over the plan, reflecting the assumptions in the labor settlement. Something we've talked about at the committee, we're going to bringing down our mortgage recording tax and real estate estimates by over $1 billion. We're down, we may be down roughly $400 million this year in those taxes, mainly reflective of the slow real estate market in terms of mortgages and so forth. But the good news is we have a broad basket of dedicated taxes, so the other taxes are actually performing really well. So in the state's adopted financial plan, they were able to project higher sales tax and corporate surcharge, and were, due to job growth, able to estimate higher payroll mobility taxes, not just from the increase in the rate, but from the increase in wages themselves. And then we've been able to bring up our estimate of tolls and fares driven by more traffic and a better estimate on, or more positive estimate on fare generation per level of ridership. So here's numerically what we showed, the deficits previously. And then the green area is all the changes in the state budget, the increase in the PMT from raising the rate, increased funding for paratransit, the one-time direct state subsidy. We're assuming casino license fees come in play out in 26 and 27, $500 million in each year. And then the additional service-related expenses and bringing the fare increase down from the original 5.5 down to 4%. So that's $6.5 billion, kind of covers the $6.5 billion in previous deficits. And then we have all the other changes, again, the main ones being in labor assumption, real estate taxes. We have other changes in the budget, but then the higher dedicated taxes, additional toll and fares, and then we've got in there the additional MTA operating efficiencies, the additional $100 million a year starting in 2025, which is on top of the $400 million that is planned to start in 2024. And then all the other changes we've put in the last line item, the OPEB trust disbursement deferral, which is really, we have money in the OPEB trust that we thought we would take out during this plan period. The good news is, on top of these zeros, we project there'll be money in the OPEB trust to help pay for retiree health costs out in 2028 and 2029. So like any budget, it's a projection, it's a plan, and we mitigated the deficits, but the risks remain, and the risks are continued paid ridership recovery. We need we need to get from 70 to 80%. If we get lower growth, less revenue, and if we only get half the growth, then we'll be short $325 million a year in the revenue that we've got projected in the plan. Dedicated tax receipts, the economy's been performing pretty well. Range of outcomes, if we did hit a slower economy, is it could cost us anywhere between $250 and $750 million under a more severe outcome per year if tax receipts fell back. Casino revenue, nothing for the next 3 years, but the timing, if it's slower than anticipated in terms of getting the casinos sited and so forth, that does create an issue that we'd have to address out in 26 and 27. And then MTA operating efficiencies, which are key, and anything less than full implementation is obviously a risk to the budget, which I will open it up for any questions people have, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rich and Kathy to talk about that operating efficiencies and how they're going about closing in on that final amount.
Questions? Sir?
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the presentation. Just two quick questions. Number one, when does the federal money, how are you spreading that again? If you can just, when does the federal money run out?
So the federal money went to reimburse deficits last year. That did free up local subsidy money that we otherwise would have had to use. And that's going to be used to cover a portion of this year's deficit, little bits over the years, but we've really deployed that money based on the approval we had in December to bring down debt service costs by about $1.7 billion over the plan period. We funded the OPEB trust, and we did a billion in pension prepayments that will be used up during the plan period. So I would say the way to then kind of characterize all those pieces is that the resources will continue to provide benefit through 2027, and if we don't need to tap into the OPEB trust, will provide resources for us beyond 27 due to that deposit in the OPEB trust. But technically, the COVID money, the federal COVID money was spent last year. It's just
Got it. Thank you. And just last question, did the McKinsey ridership projection include any mode shift from congestion pricing?
So it did. It was a pretty modest amount because when you think about even if you get a large percentage of drivers going onto the subway or the commuter rail, their count is very small relative to the base we already have. So I think it's like a 1% or less impact on revenue, but that's baked in.
Other questions? Norman?
Yeah, well, there's a B&T impact though too, no? I mean, because now people are going to tend to use the Midtown Tunnel and the.
Correct.
I mean, you know, I don't
So
know that
just-
it's substantial, but you know.
So there are projected, actually, although there's reduced traffic and congestion in this central business district, as you just stated, there actually could be some upside in terms of how the traffic diverts to the paid crossings rather than the free crossings. So we have not built that into the budget yet. The additional toll revenue we're assuming is from, what we're seeing is growth since the pandemic, and we'll watch the numbers when congestion pricing comes online and see if that additional paid toll revenue materializes.
Yeah, well, me and my neighbors in South Brooklyn are looking forward to that, to get all the cars off our block that are trying to get to the free bridges.
Good. And then we're aligned in our interests.
Blanca, please.
Just a question, and thinking out loud, as we have been receiving updates on the recommendation from the Blue Ribbon panel on fare evasion, have you taken into consideration, or is it too early to take into consideration how those recommendations, once they're fully implemented, can also positively impact our budget?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's critical because we need that 10% paid ridership growth. And if, the underlying projections assume that we make some progress on fare evasion, that, if our fare evasion gets 3% worse, then we need 13% more ridership to get to the net 10. If we can get fare evasion 3% better, then they only need 7% growth from things like people coming to work more often or doing more retail. So what I'll say, although it's very hard to kind of tease out all the individual components, an effective fare evasion strategy is going to be critical to being able to get that paid ridership to that 80% level. Otherwise, it's just, we'll have too many headwinds coming at us if it, if we don't make progress or, if it gets worse.
Other comments? Andrew?
On that point, Kevin, when we saw the new prototypes, or they're new to us, of the turnstiles and exits, slam gates, and all of those things after the fare evasion panel gave its final report, that takes time to do the RFI, which we heard was going to be done earlier today, and to get the
Right.
bidding and to get them. So is that going to be taken into account, the time it will take to get the new turnstiles and new exit gates?
Yeah, again, there's fighting the fare evasion is a multi-pronged approach. So we've got money in for, more of the gate guards,
Right,
working on the
right.
delayed gate, and then the fare arrays is another solution. So I think that, what we need to see is, some of those things that we can do in the more immediate term starting to help, because you're right that the gate arrays are going to take a long period of time, and that's not going to be the solution for
Right.
getting
short term.
10% more
Yeah.
ridership over the next 4 years.
Thank you.
Other comments? Other comments? All right, let me just make three brief ones. Amazing, Kevin. Just amazing. I mean, I think none of us have seen 5 years of balanced budgets, never mind even a couple. And I think the threat of that bogey out there is very far out now. So thank you for that. It's incredible. I described this list as a miraculous mix of puts and takes. If you see all the adds and subtractions, it's pretty impressive. So well done to you and your team. Thank you for that. Secondly, thank you to the governor and the legislature. You guys really partnered brilliantly on this one. I think you're right. We did send a signal, but really they came to the table and provide the leadership that we all needed, because in some ways, I guess we can all go home as a finance committee, because our biggest fear over the last few years has abated. Third, one thing I'd like to say that Rob Mojica used to be a board member here, state budget director, had said often, a budget's a plan. So it's a plan. And whether riders will come back, whether we're going to see the right increase in drivers that we actually will need for tolls, whether fare evasion is capped, that's what we're here to do, provide oversight, because it's not guaranteed. We've gotten the tools, we've been given the largesse to solve the problem, but it's not guaranteed. So now we asked Kathy and Rich to come in today because primarily because Midori Vitavali had asked to have a conversation about the measures that are being put in place to achieve the meaningful cost savings that are necessary to close this budget. I'd ask you, I mean, Midori's not here, so she's missed our opportunity. Maybe is she on the video? No. But she can watch it at a future date. Give us the highlights from Hamlet version, if you will, because our CFO is heading off to a deserved trip at 4 o'clock. So we have about 25 minutes before. He is. He's going to New Jersey. So that's no, I'm kidding. He's going well beyond New Jersey, but the journey starts in New Jersey. So I don't know who's going to start, but one of you will start.
Given that I talked to Kevin multiple times in my vacation last week, I'm going to stretch this out. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I will be brief. So just to recall, there were 4 strategies that we talked about, and I think it's now 6 months ago to the committee and the board for both the railroads and transit about how we're going to reduce costs. So it was harnessing technology and data to improve productivity, sharpening management focus on cost drivers, develop common standards and practices, but by the way, among the railroads and transit, and then looking at our peers, and then investing capital to reduce operating expenses. And for transit, that's also within the push to improve service. So as I understand it, I don't have nearly as much history as most folks around this room do, but in the past, the efforts to reduce costs were focused on headcount reductions, taking vacancies. And it was not based on necessarily data or based on improving service. It was just a scramble, as occurred from time to time, or maybe annually. I tell a joke. I met a person here when I first started last year, and I asked her how long she had been here. She said 33 years. And I asked her how many budget crises she had been through, and she said 33. And so that's a bit of the culture here and so really, focusing on not only reducing the operating costs that Kevin talked about, but also the twin goal of improving service. And as many of you know, we talked about it at Transit Committee today. Our goal by next June is to have all of our customers, regardless of mode, at least 7 out of 10 saying they are satisfied or very satisfied with service. So with that said, we have focused a number of our efforts. I have some deep dives on a few of these, which I can speak to in a moment. But around technology and data, there are at least 4. There's a bunch of levers, but the 4 main ones that we're talking about is subway predictive maintenance, which we're actually tailoring our inspection cycles to focus not on what we did in the past, or we've always done it that way, but actually looking at the data to say, no, we should be inspecting that car on a 6.5-year basis, and that switch every 2 weeks, and maybe that switch, twice a week. I'll talk about subways in a moment. Bus predictive maintenance, you've heard me speak about this a couple of times, but this is using AI, artificial intelligence, to predict before a bus fails, and then getting that out of service. And the AI has become so successful on this after treatment program that we do not have to diagnose the issue. It comes in the bus, and our teams are able to the AI actually spits out to the team a repair plan, as opposed to spending a couple of hours diagnosing precisely. We're also looking at emergency response. I would say during the subway action crisis, probably in 2017, we probably constructed an emergency response that thankfully is not, I would say, as much needed today as it was 6 years ago, because given all the work that many folks before me have done. And then you've also heard a great success story with our Access-a-Ride self-booking. Chris and team have implemented the ability for our customers to now book their Access-a-Ride not by phone, but by app, meaning self-service, meaning we can look at call volume reductions in our call volume. So just quickly on predictive maintenance on subways, as I mentioned, our major car overhauls in the past have either been 6 or 7 years, and it's sort of vacillated. We are moving to a 6.5-year cycle, given the data that we've studied over the last 6 months. We will watch this carefully, but we're convinced that we can do major car overhauls every 6.5 years. Without any interruptions to service whatsoever. We're also looking at our routine car inspections, again, with data to see where we can improve or otherwise look at. And so rather than doing those in routine inspections every 68 to 78 days, we're moving it to a 75 to 85 days, or again, you can see the mileage there. And as I mentioned, switch maintenance at non-critical locations every 60 days up to 30. I just want to emphasize, this is we probably could have stretched this more, frankly, but balancing safety, which is obviously paramount, but with the need to look at the data on how much inspections we're doing, we're very comfortable that this is a prudent way within our benchmarks to reduce costs, but make sure that we're maintaining safe service, but also a service that's working. On buses, I mentioned, predictive maintenance. I would just say, we've already seen an estimate since December on this after system plan of about $1.2 million. We're putting out an RFP now to look at other systems, HVAC, for example, perhaps the engine, to see if there are other subsystems that we can look at. But there's been a lot of good work on thinking about how to be predictive in our maintenance. Most transit systems are reactive. Being proactive, being predictive, we will be leading the country. We certainly are on bus, and that's the push on subways as well. Obviously, for purposes of this presentation, reducing costs is what we're focused on, but this is all about making sure we're smartly deploying our resources. On sharpening management, focus on cost drivers. So insourcing cleaning, you all know, I think most of you know that during COVID, we struggled with hiring, and so we outsourced a number of our cleaning costs. That actually drove up our costs, and so we have been bringing that all back in-house, and as a result, we're being able to reduce our overall expenses while still having a very high standard of cleanliness in our stations and in our cars. We extended the maximum train crew shifts for some from 9 hours and 59 minutes to 10 hours and 59 minutes, which allows us to reduce costs by about $2 million. And then consolidating real estate. We're working with the real estate team to see, have we overleased? Are we, do we have too much space? And there's certainly a couple of areas working with David's team that we are just not renewing leases because we don't need the space. On insourcing cleaning, so just to give you a sense, as you know, we are very much focused on customer satisfaction. As you can see, we've actually had a 10-point improvement over the last year on station cleanliness and train cleanliness while we're insourcing and reducing our costs. Obviously, labor has been our partner throughout this. We've hired about 800 cleaners total, station cleaners and end-of-line cleaners. So not an insignificant, people power that we brought in-house. And then we're also looking at, greater specialization, power washing, for example, some other, our high team, our HIT team. It matters when you have a 6'2" chairman who rides your system often, so looking for those high spaces we're very much focused on. And again, we'll monitor this operating model, but we're convinced that this is a proverbial unicorn in this business, reducing our costs and actually improving customer satisfaction. On developing standards and practices, obviously, we reimagine our station agents, and that is an overall cost reduction because of some overtime changes that were agreed to in exchange for the $1 an hour and a few other enhancements we gave to the agents. I'll talk a little about scaling LEDs in a moment, and then reducing peak demand. We're really looking at our energy costs. I think it's fair to say New York City Transit might be the largest or one of the largest consumers of electricity in the state. So we're really looking at how we are utilizing our power needs and our utility needs. But on scaling LEDs, there's a lot of stats here. I know Kevin is getting ready to change into his shorts and take off, so I'll be quick. But suffice to say, LEDs are more energy efficient. You change them out they last 6 to 7 times longer than traditional elements. And as part of our station cleanliness, we know that customers are telling us that dark spots in stations not only feel dirty, but they also feel unsafe. And so as we're doing station renovations, as we're going out, we're changing our LEDs to be, again, part of our faster, cleaner, safer program. But you can see here, lifespan improves, energy costs come down. So, we're pursuing another $150 million. So all that totaled up to, and I should say there's no silver bullet. I mean, we are literally looking for the nickels and dimes in the cushions. And so part of that is we're not just identifying at transit just $300 million or $350 million. We're identifying lots of opportunities, knowing that some will come true, some won't, some will come in higher, some will come in lower. That's just how, going back to Rob Mojica and the quote about a plan, we're focused on that. But we have another $150 million. I'll just maybe mention a couple. Expanding use of our e-mirrors. So Transit Committee knows this, the chair in particular. About 25% of all of our, quote, collisions for buses have to do with our mirrors. They're bumping into another car, cars bumping into them, these dining structures. And so e-mirrors will allow us to reduce their costs there, as an example. Employee availability. I wouldn't be a transit conversation and a conversation about costs without employee availability. We hope through the collective bargaining agreement process, we made some improvements there, and actually some potential gain sharing, so more to come when that's approved. We are working, as I mentioned, with Kathy and her team with Metro North and Long Island Railroad to look at areas where we can work together. So rail grinding, for example. Last year in New York City Transit, about half of the money we paid for in rail grinding was time that they were not rail grinding. And so making sure that we're actually utilizing the contractor appropriately is critically important. So, I know Kathy has a presentation. Well, happy to take questions, but this is an effort that is coming out of the Office of the President, working with buses and subways in particular. And then there's certainly some items here which require, headquarters assistance as well. So whether it's finance, human resources, IT, procurement, we're leaning on our shared services partners as well to deliver. But again, I just want to emphasize that this is not about an effort just to find a $300 or $400 million number, but actually ways to improve the way we're doing business while we're delivering a better product.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Kathy, and then if there's any questions.
Okay. I feel like I have incredible power here, being the last thing between Kevin and his vacation. So, but I'll move things along because a lot of the themes you're going to hear.
In the spirit of operating efficiencies.
Absolutely. I'm trying to save money and be more efficient. So, a lot of what you're going to hear from me is very comparable to what you've already heard from Rich. So even though I have very long talking points here, I'll try to keep it fast. One of the benefits of being in the combined position that I find myself in is the opportunity to compare practices at both railroads as we seek operational efficiencies and savings across the railroads. We have been at this for over a year now. Actually, some of the changes that we've made in our operating and maintenance practices are already being realized, and we were able to save $20 million across both railroads that we're currently realizing. So the intent of the presentation is similar to what Rich has already laid out, is to show you that it's not just a budget reduction exercise. It is a comprehensive effort to be able to change the way that we do business so that we're more efficient. We want to justify the faith that our partners have put in us to be able to deliver service safely, reliably, but more efficiently. We have locked the first $50 million towards our $100 million target, and we are already working towards the next $50 million in order to reach the total of $100 million that has been set aside for the railroads to be able to satisfy this goal. So you saw this slide for Rich. We are similarly looking at initiatives within each of these four categories. We're going to dig in on the first three. We'll talk very briefly about the investing capital to reduce operating expenses at the tail end. But what you're going to hear from me today is really focused on the first three: the technology, the common standards and practices, and sharpening the management focus on cost drivers. Comparable to what Rich mentioned to you already, you will see illustrative initiatives within each of these categories, but items big and small, right? I mean, there are some big items that we really expect to rely upon, but much smaller items that are interesting in and of themselves, and that some of them we hope will lead to additional opportunities as we scale them up and potentially put them in place across both properties. Again, as Rich mentioned a little while ago, it's a collective effort and partner with the MTA. We're relying on the People Tower to fill key positions. We're going to require IT support for technology enhancements, procurement support, legal support, and of course, increased collaboration and communication with our unions will be important to be able to achieve all of these objectives and to have long-term success. So this is a slide. I just want to pause on this slide because Kevin was kind enough to mention that, solid performance, has really been at the basis for, our ability to get more funds from our funding partners. And, I'm grateful to the staffs on both railroads, consistently high on-time performance, declining customer injuries, and this is all borne out by the ridership increases, that we've seen over the course of the spring. Since the GCM schedule was launched, almost 25% on the Long Island, but also a very healthy almost 15% on Metro North since this year began. So happy to see so many people come back. We want to continue to be able to bring people back to the rails, but at the same time do our business more efficiently and more effectively. So on the slide with respect to harnessing technology and data to improve productivity, I'm going to talk about $8.4 million in sample initiatives that we're looking at. The one thing that I do want to sort of call out on the Metro North side, that's a little bit of inside baseball, is that because of our service agreement with the state of Connecticut, in order to achieve the New York FBR targets, we always have to overachieve a bit. The New Haven line is our busiest line by far, but to the extent that we identify savings that are attributable to New Haven line operations, those savings are shared with the state of Connecticut. So really any of the numbers that you see here are New York numbers, New York savings, but there is this sort of separate issue with respect to Metro North savings targets that Connecticut does get a share of those. So if you look at the first item, the train scheduling, this actually is a New York item. We are using our passenger loading data, which you've heard a lot about in connection with the Long Island Railroad service planning exercise. We are better matching our train lengths to customer demand. So we're adjusting consist sizes to where we're seeing the need for longer consist sizes and shorter consist sizes, and we're actually able to realize $100 million by that data-driven effort. On the materials management side, our M&E teams, they're doing an overall data-driven review of materials usage and requirements. By changing the points at which we reorder materials, we can better manage our spend. One example of that on the Long Island side is a deep dive regarding the minimum material necessary to be able to maintain the M3 fleet. And then on the energy management side, this is a smaller item, but one that we're excited about. The Runwise team that is working on this particular energy management initiative, they were finalists in the Transit Tech Lab competition. And along with New York City Transit, we piloted their technology for a couple months this past winter in several railroad facilities that rely upon older legacy heating systems. The snapshot of their results shows that their real-time monitoring services of building temperatures through a network of wireless sensors was allowing us to be able to run our heating system more efficiently based upon changing temperatures rather than just setting the boilers and kind of running away, right? So this has allowed us to save fuel, cut carbon emissions, and we also got positive feedback from our building management staff. They can monitor building monitor building temperatures and make heating adjustments from their mobile phones. We're intending to expand this system to other buildings for the upcoming heating system and plan to save up to $400,000 on this, with additional recurring savings possible as we scale it up and bring it to other facilities. Developing common practices, common standards and best practices. On the rolling stock side, we've really sort of dug in on the M7s, which is a fleet that is common to both railroads. We have adjusted and streamlined the truck overhaul RCM program at the Long Island side within the guidance that we've gotten from the FRA. This includes savings from reduced support equipment duty cycles, streamlined maintenance in the support shops, improved wrench time savings. We're in the process of digging in to adjust inspection frequency in cases where our current practices exceed FRA mandates. And through the review and realignment of current periodic inspection procedures, we're able to achieve savings through the extension of auxiliary and propulsion systems, complete periodic inspections, door inspections, being able to do these at 180 days versus the current 92 days. All these efforts will still keep our programs within the FRA mandated requirements. On the MOV side, we are looking potentially, and we're going to dig in on this a little bit on the subsequent slide, we're looking to seek further opportunities for wrench time and improved work practices across all aspects of our railroads. We have a pilot going at our Croton Harmon facility with respect to standardizing our work practices with respect to the inspection of our M7s. We're expecting to be able to create value from job time reduction and the increased predictability on our 92-day PI cycle. The project leverages baseline standards as documented in recent business process engineering efforts across both railroads. We plan on taking a methodical look at various crafts involved in our inspection work using data analytics and Lean Six Sigma principles to determine optimal sequencing and timing of the work. This is about not only this specific project, but also the potential to scale it up at both railroads, apply these principles with respect to other maintenance opportunities at both railroads to be able to realize savings. With respect to sharpening management focus on cost drivers, on the MOV side, we have really dug in on overtime drivers by craft and location. We are scrutinizing assignments and identifying where more work can be done on straight time as opposed to overtime. We expect this initial $7 million figure in the MOV departments to grow across both railroads as we make our way to achieving our November targets. Coming out of the pandemic and the hiring freezes that preceded the pandemic, we find ourselves depleted in key craft titles like machinists and electricians at both railroads, and we are working very hard to recruit talent in a tight job market. I'm going to talk a little bit in detail about how we are addressing this connection between vacancies, hiring, and overtime, because this is an area that's receiving particular attention at the railroads. On the maintenance of waste side, we're also collecting better data about when and where we use overtime. We're getting managers below the department head level involved in the process, which provides additional focus on where reductions are possible. On the Long Island Railroad, we're changing how we manage track outage programs to be able to reduce the use of temporary platforms, which has historically been an overtime driver. Contract management, the third example, is just focusing on contracts. We're taking a hard look at maintenance, materials, and service contracts for targeted savings opportunities, identifying where we can reduce or eliminate spending. It's not simply an administrative review of our contracts. In some cases, we are rethinking how we do business. We're also working closely with my friend Mr. Davey here on collaborating with top suppliers regarding overall business practices, common across the three agencies in order to identify savings, and we expect to see increasing amount of savings as this work progresses. So this is the slide where we're digging in a little bit with respect to filling key craft vacancies. A key driver in our M&V departments is the need to cover open shifts on overtime. At Metro North, 50% of year-to-date overtime is used to cover vacant or absent positions. Vacancy coverage accounts for about 15.4%, absentee coverage about 34.3%. On the Long Island side, 53% of year-to-date overtime covers vacant or absent positions, 17.4 on the vacancy side, 36.8 on the absentee side. We're depleted in key craft titles such as machinists, electricians, and carmen, and we are struggling to recruit talent in a tight job market. We've been working exceptionally closely with our friends in the MTA People Tower. Our number one goal is to ensure retaining talent and attracting new talent to the railroad. We have been making some progress this year. On the Long Island Railroad side, as of July 1st, we have onboarded a total of 289 new employees. On the Metro North side, 221. We've done all kinds of work with the People Tower, day in the life videos, open houses, connecting with schools, our internship program with CUNY, our Metro North engineer training program, and other incentives across the railroad. We are continuing to reach out to encourage more and more people to find a career at the railroads. In terms of our look ahead, we'll just do this very briefly. We are again looking towards data analytics to be able to leverage more information, especially on the MOW side and with respect to our materials management practices. On the management focus side, building on some of the great work that Rich has done, we're looking to improve employee availability. We're working with our IT department to be able to right-size some of our data and IT needs and be able to take savings associated with an in-depth review of those needs. With respect to the common practice, again, we've got the ongoing M7 pilot, which is going on at Harmon right now, is just kicking off, and we expect to be able to scale that up to other locations and be able to realize savings from the work that we learned from the wrench time savings that we expect to realize from that pilot. The last item, the investing capital to reduce operating expenses. Obviously, as you've heard today, the 20-year needs will be unveiled later this year, and we expect to be able to look to industrial engineering practices to be able to identify efficiencies within our existing facilities, as well as investments in future work equipment practices that will realize efficiencies as well. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, so thank you for that, both of you. I'm going to ask to really accelerate our meeting because I think we've got a very tight schedule. So questions, comments? Blanca,
Just a
please.
comment. So in addition to Commissioner Valdivia, who had requested this, I had also joined in and chimed in on making sure that we have ongoing discussions or presentations, in this case from Rich and Kathy, with respect to efficiencies. And it's great to know that not only are we looking at that $400 million goal, but now we are moving forward and adding an additional $100 million. So that is great. I think this presentation is very important because for some time now, we've been hearing about how the state, through the governor and the legislature, as well as the city, have done their share in terms of addressing the needs of this entity. But it was really important for the public and everyone else to understand and listen to what we are doing with respect to addressing our efficiency. So I appreciate this, Kevin. Thank you so much for your hard work, and similarly to Rich and Kathy for the excellent work that they do every day in addressing so many of our needs. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So Lizette, I know you have a equally firm deadline, so I give you the request to the highlights from Hamlet, which is a line from To Be or Not to Be, the Mel Brooks movie, which means the highlights, please.
Highlights, thank you. There are 2 actions this month for MTA headquarters for Finance Committee approval in the amount of $22.9 million, and these actions are found on pages 18 to 27 in the July Finance Committee book. The first action is a contract award of 2 items, one to Alliant Insurance Services, Inc. for casualty brokerage and captive management services Scope A for $3.4 million, and the other to Willis Towers Watson East for property brokerage and forensic accounting services Scope B for $1.3 million. This 5-year contract is in support of the MTA's all-agency risk management program. The award to both vendors are expected to yield savings of about $4.5 million over the base and option years compared to the broker's fees paid to the incumbent under the current expiring agreement. The second action is a request that the board ratify a declaration of immediate operating need and approve the contract award to the Research Foundation of the City of New York, RF CUNY, to administer an internship program retroactively for a period of 5 years, September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2027. The CUNY internship program, due to its success, has been chosen to implement a more expansive program, and it'll serve as a pipeline for future MTA employment opportunities. It's valued at $18.2 million for 5 years. I submit these procurement actions for Finance Committee approval.
Thank you. So we have I need a motion for 3 items, the Alliant Insurance, Willis Towers, and RF CUNY. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
So,
Thank you, Sam.
Second.
Thank you, Hada. Questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. Was that anything else?
Yes, there's one joint information item on page 28 of the committee book for Long Island Railroad on behalf of itself, Metro North Railroad, and New York City Transit, which was approved by its respective committee, requesting the board approve the award of a contract to Lorem Maintenance of Way, Inc. for rail grinding services. There's also one information item on page 30 of the committee book for New York City Transit, which was approved by its respective committee, requesting that the board memorialize a modification to a competitively negotiated purchase contract with New Flyer of America for an extension to the delivery schedule to allow New Flyer the time to develop, test, and install an early warning detection system for thermal events on each bus prior to delivery.
Okay, so just again, remember, we now do these in the operating committees, but it's being reminded to this committee just to be aware of it. So there's no action, it's just literally an information. I mean, so you may feel like you already heard this before, because chances are if you were either of those committees or both, you did. Okay, Mr. Florio, you have the floor on real estate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 action items for consideration and approval. The first item is for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and it is a modification to the existing policy for licensing, leasing, or acquisition of property rights in support of MTA capital projects or ongoing operations. The second item is a transit-oriented development item for New York City Transit. It is the RFP conditional designation for the Gun Hill Road development. The following 3 items are for MTA Metro North Railroad. The third is a master agreement with Amtrak to facilitate the acquisition of permanent easements in the Bronx and Queens in support of the Penn Station Access Project. The fourth is an acquisition of a permanent easements in Queens from HD Development of Maryland in support of the Penn Station Access Project. The fifth and final item is authorization to acquire property interest by negotiated settlement or eminent domain for the Claremont Substation Project in the Bronx. I note that this is an additional substation to increase capacity for the Harlem Line in the Bronx. I had a short presentation. If you'd like me to forego it in the interest of time, I can do it in September, or I can hand it out.
Well, let me just explain what we've. So on the fourth item related to Penn access, there's a series of easements required to create the access, and so because this is a fairly long-standing project and lots of pieces, I asked David to make sure that we understood where it was in the context, these particular easements and the whole piece of work. I don't know how people are on time. We can spend a couple of minutes. Why don't you just do the briefest of
Sure.
sense of where we are?
Sure. Okay. Right now, let me see. There we go. This is an overview of the project and the facilities that support it. There are basically 4 facility types that are being supported by the acquisition: stations, substations, right-of-way, and the New Rochelle Yard. And then there are 4 owner types: private, public, Amtrak, and utility. These are the 23 private properties. 5 have been acquired already through negotiation. 1 is in negotiation with Home Depot. That's the private easement I noted earlier. So those 5 have been acquired. 1 is close to being acquired. There are 7 others. 2 being negotiated by my colleague Bob Paley and his group. That should be done by October. And 5 are pending title vesting with the courts in the Bronx. The remaining 10 private properties are in connection with the New Rochelle Yard, and they are awaiting design. For 37 public properties, Most of them are with the City of New York, and state statute has promulgated a process by which we acquire the property before value is assessed. So right now, we're really focusing on the actual instruments that will get us this property. And I note that we've already been given temporary access to all these properties, so it's not holding up construction at all. There are 12 Amtrak properties. Again, Amtrak has granted us temporary access to these properties so we can begin construction while we undertake the process of acquiring these easements. The master agreement that I noted earlier here creates the framework by which we can, as we acquire property, we don't have to go to the board 12 times. One master easement agreement covers all 12 properties. And there are 4 utility properties, 2 with Con Ed, which again has granted us access to the properties. So in no instance with respect to the Amtrak or publicly owned utility properties are we impaired from constructing. And that pretty much is the sum total of.
So you're going to be coming
presentation.
before us a few more times, I guess, is the takeaway.
We'll come before you for the private properties.
Yes.
To the extent they're not subject to eminent domain.
Good. Anything else you want to say before we ask for a motion?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up, sir.
All right, good. That's very helpful. Questions on the presentation? Go ahead,
And
please.
just quickly, David, we had no issues. Everything was resolved. You were able to get these properties, these easements and everything. No issues with anyone, right?
No, well, for 5 of the properties, they're with the courts for award by eminent domain. So
Oh,
we
they
could
are
not- we
5
could-
from
they're
eminent
right,
domain.
that was listed before. They were
So you tried and then we went the eminent
Correct.
domain route? Okay.
correct.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. Okay.
Bob Paley is here to answer any questions regarding the Gun Hill action item as well.
Okay.
Okay. Can I have a motion for the 5 real estate items, please? Thank you, Blanca. Second. Okay, thank you, Hada. Any questions, comments on any of these items? Going once, going twice. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. David?
4 information items, Mr. Chairman. The first is our annual report on Grand Central Terminal performance. The second and third items are with Metro North. One is a renewal of a parking agreement with Spatz Property for adjacent commercial parking. And there's also a 1-day permit agreement between Metro North and Bike New York for parking at the Poughkeepsie Station. And the last item is our information item is a report on agreements entered into directly by the Real Estate Department pursuant to board policy.
Thank you very much, David. So look, we wish our CFO a bon voyage as he has accomplished the most important task, which is to balance the budget. Well done, sir. Have a good vacation. And a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you, Hada. Thank you very much. All right, see you all on Wednesday.